If you want to support the Missing Witches Project, join the coven, come hang out with us. Or buy our books, New Moon Magic and Missing Witches, and our deck of oracles, the Missing Witches Deck of Oracles. Find everything you need to know at missingwitches.com.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. 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 You must be a witch.
Listen, I'm no stranger to name-calling, having my visions and ideas mocked. I've been critiqued and jeered at because of my art, my appearance, my personality. And I'm proud to say that none of that ever really stopped me for too long. When I'm in the flow, the wind that gets knocked out of me pushes into my sails and drives me further. I'm willing to take the heat, if that's the price of freedom. When I got married, I didn't change my name. This identity, the one I'm sitting inside right now, was hard-fought. My mother has had 3 last names, her father's and 2 husbands. And the idea of changing ownership just really never resonated with my feminist ethos. Of course, there are a million reasons why you might want to change your name, and I support all of them. But me, I'm Amy Torek, I'm Amy T, and I always will be, in name and vision. I'm a witch. I don't care what they say. Now, take that idea and times it by 1,000,000. How does a conceptual artist from an affluent family in Japan become, for a moment, the most hated woman in music, if not the world? Well, one of the first steps is to call her a witch. Then, use her name as shorthand to describe music wags who stick their noses into boy bands and ruin them. I've been called a YOKO myself. Kara Kolwicki wrote, quote, "Yoko Ono's name is tossed around as an insult, sometimes jokingly, sometimes really and truly hatefully. Any woman who dates a male band member and expects to be treated like a person, or any woman who is seen to, in some way, cause a change in a male artist of any kind, is particularly at risk of being called YOKO. To a lesser extent, so is any woman who expects to be given equal consideration as her partner, and her partner's friends' friends. Why is it an insult exactly? Well, because everyone hates YOKO. She's a mentally unbalanced, scheming, money-grubbing, castrating bitch. Oh, and she broke up the Beatles. Or so they say." End quote. As rumors swirled around her that she had enchanted or hypnotized a beetle with a black magic love spell that made him powerless against her will, Yoko somehow managed to stay the course as artist, activist, and disruptor, and shocked the world by declaring, "Yes, I'm a witch." Through it all, and this is maybe her most amazing achievement, she remained Yoko Ono. In name, in vision, in character. Literally all of Yoko's art is an invitation, a provocation, and a spell. She asks us to imagine worlds without borders, without war, no heaven, no hell, no rules that tell us who gets to be heard and who must remain silent. Rules about what constitutes music and art. For decades, the media reduced her to a punchline, a scapegoat for the rage of men who couldn't bear the sight of a woman who dared to be visionary. But Yoko refused to be silenced. She carried scars of war and displacement and turned them into instruction pieces, tiny rituals of transformation. She taught us that art could be a whispered command, a chance to rewire consciousness. Breathe. Count the stars. Listen to the sound of the earth turning. Not just songs, sculptures, poems, or installations. All the pieces of Yoko Ono's oeuvre are invitations to magic. She has always been an oracle in her own right, using her voice, her body, her art as portals to liberation through imagination. Yoko reminds us that vulnerability is power, that joy can be a revolutionary act, that peace is not passive but ferocious, that war is over if we want it. She said, quote, "I think that all women are witches, in the sense that a witch is a magical being. And a wizard, which is a male version of a witch, is kind of revered, and people respect wizards. But a witch, my God, we have to burn them. It's the male chauvinistic society that we're living in for the longest time, 3,000 years or whatever. And so I just wanted to point out the fact that men and women are magical beings. We are very blessed that way. So I'm just bringing that out. Don't be scared of witches, because we are good witches, and you should appreciate our magical power." End quote. Despite all of her magical works, artistic engagement of all 6 senses, despite her obsession with the esoteric, consulting psychics, numerologists, and astrologers before making any moves, shuffling tarot cards at business meetings, perhaps what makes Yoko the most witchy is her persecution. Fear, superstition, and social control have intersected with racism and misogyny throughout history. Accusations of witchcraft, trials, and executions often followed unexplained illness, crop failures, livestock deaths, or any sudden misfortunes. Marginalized or non-conforming women, widows, healers, outspoken women, were at highest risk. Continue to be at highest risk. And in this history, we find Yoko, the woman who broke up the world's most beloved band, the woman who poisoned the Beatles' apple. But the fact is, the Beatles were on a slow trajectory toward fragmentation before Yoko, driven by creative divergence, business disputes, personal growth. Yoko's arrival didn't start the unraveling, but John Lennon's insistence that Yoko be involved in his creative process gave the other Beatles someone, something, on whom to focus their growing disdain for each other, and for the band that formed their identities. And yet, none of that fragmentation comes up when we talk about the Beatles' breakup. We blame Yoko immediately, forgetting that she was an established and respected artist before she ever met John, that she was a visionary, and it was her creative spirit that attracted him to her in the first place. I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here, so bear with me. There's this clip you can watch on YouTube of John Lennon playing music with Chuck Berry, a man often hailed as the inventor of rock and roll. Yoko is doing background vocals, and I admit, her famous or infamous primal guttural screeching feels at odds with the classic chugga chugga of the birth of rock and roll. The clip went viral because of Chuck Berry's face as he reacts to Yoko's singing. Yoko is again the punchline. Yoko is a joke, and Chuck Berry is a victim of Yoko's caterwaul. But y'all, Chuck Berry has been accused of assaulting a woman at a New York hotel, was sued by female staff at his restaurant for putting hidden cameras in the women's bathroom. But he had a statue devoted to him in Missouri. And John, too, had a history of violence and bad behavior, but in the archive of history, it's Yoko who is the villain in this story. Because she dared to experiment in the face of sacrosanct, antique rock and roll. When we talk about Yoko's caterwauling, we leave out something important. Yoko can sing. She proves it on albums like Double Fantasy, where her voice rings out clear and true. She chose to make her guttural noises as an expression of pain, suffering, war, and desire, keening and howling and silence. It's not like John Cage, whom Yoko's gang called JC, John Cage, Jesus Christ, a deity of the avant-garde, made musical pieces of silence and destruction because he couldn't play piano. He was a skilled and gifted pianist who chose to make confrontational art instead. Same goes for Nam June Paik, or Marcel Duchamp, who was an excellent painter but instead hung a urinal on a wall. Yoko was formally trained in Japanese singing, but said, quote, "I took and morphed my vocalization consciously from kabuki and no," end quote. It wasn't ineptitude. It was a choice. I click a short clip of the Chuck Berry incident that was posted just 1 year ago. It has 2 million views and 2,000 comments. The comments on the video aren't surprising. Quote, "There are 3 musical legends in this video: Lennon, Berry, and the guy who unplugged Yoko's microphone." Quote, "The lack of self-awareness and disrespect by that woman is remarkable." Quote, "I'm starting to think John hired someone to kill him." Quote, "60 years of bashing Yoko Ono is not near enough." Quote, "Rule number 1, never bring your wife or girlfriend into the studio." And of course, the ever-present, quote, "The wrong person got shot." Again, I can't imagine the fortitude required to continue in the face of such vitriol. Still coming. 60 years of bashing Yoko Ono is not near enough. Maybe I would change my name. Shrink back into the hedges, make myself small. But Yoko remained Yoko Ono. In name, in vision, in character. Make no mistake, Yoko Ono is a witch. But it's her commitment to identity, vision, and imagination that, for me, warrants her place in the missing witches pantheon. Yoko Ono remains Yoko Ono. So for today, and I say this as a big fan and lover of the Beatles, fuck all this rock and roll boys club, no cock, no rock, YouTube noise. Let's get to know the Yoko who exists outside of the heavy shadow of the Fab Four and dismissive eye rolls of the rock and roll crowd. The one who said, quote, "Music, words, and silence, they are all spells. They carry energy. They change perception," end quote. The one who said, quote, "Everyday life is full of rituals. When you do them consciously, when you perform them with intention, they become magic," end quote. The one who sang, quote, "Yes, I'm a witch. I'm a bitch. I don't care what you say. My voice is real. My voice speaks truth. I don't fit in your ways. I'm not going to die for you. You might as well face the truth. I'm going to stick around for quite a while. We're going to say, we're going to try. We're going to try it our way. We've been repressed. We've been depressed. Suppression all the way. We're not going to die for you. We're not seeking vengeance, but we're not going to kill ourselves for your convenience. Each time we don't say what we want to say, we're dying. Each time we close our minds to how we feel, we're dying. Each time we gotta do what we want to do, we're living. Each time we're open to what we see and hear, we're living." End quote. Of these lyrics, Jessica Hundley wrote, quote, "Yoko Ono wrote these words in 1974, bristling at media backlash over her relationship with John Lennon, targeting her righteous indignation at the press, at the patriarchy, at the brittle, unyielding evidence of the cultural establishment. Yoko was and remains a witch, defiant, powerful, a magical being, manifesting the spell of creative action. By her very existence, she defies stereotype. By proclaiming herself a witch, she transforms a legacy of persecution into an expression of empowerment." End quote. Yoko Ono was born in Tokyo in 1933, straight into a life of contradictions. Wealth and devastation, tradition and dislocation, and this was a kind of aesthetic that she carried throughout her life. For his 40th birthday, Yoko gave John a homemade tie that she had knitted herself, plus a $25,000 wristwatch. Her father was a banker, her mother was an artist. During the Second World War, she and her family fled to the countryside as Tokyo burned. She remembers hunger, remembers trading her family's possessions for food, remembers lying on the ground as bombs fell, staring at the sky and imagining she could pull the clouds down like curtains. Out of devastation, she learned the witch's first lesson. When reality collapses, imagination becomes survival. In the countryside, Yoko was with her younger brother, Kai, and she felt responsible for him. Quote, "We were starving. My brother looking extremely sad, I remember thinking, why don't we make a menu that would really make us feel good? How about starting with ice cream? Lying on our backs, looking up at the sky through an opening in the roof. We exchanged menus in the air and used our powers of visualization to survive." End quote. Her brother said, quote, "We made those menus. We imagined the food. That was my sister's first conceptual art piece." End quote. And so it was that young Yoko found the medium for her art: imagination. The artist and musician Laurie Anderson observed, quote, "Yoko had this revolutionary idea that art happens mainly in your head, which is where her work manifests." And art historian and curator Raiko Tomi said, quote, "She is a conceptual artist who said you don't need an object or material to create art. Basically, all you need is your mind. You can construct a painting in your head. In your mind, you can create an event." It was a new concept of what art could be and who could make it. End quote. It was witchcraft. In 1954, Yoko's father's work carried the family back to the United States, where they had been for a time before the war. Yoko arrived in New York and enrolled at Sarah Lawrence College, a place alive with philosophy, literature, and avant-garde whispers. In New York, Yoko would carry that memory of bombs and imaginary ice cream forward. The war had taught her that everything can vanish, that the ground beneath your feet is never certain. But she also learned that the invisible is powerful. Thought, breath, and vision were tools as real as stone, sounds, words, and paint. And New York in the 1950s had its own high magic. Jazz clubs, beat poets, painters, and thinkers tearing open and reconstructing reality. Yoko stepped into this electric current, carrying with her those scars of war, that discipline of survival, and that power of imagination. In classrooms and lofts, she began to translate her visions into instructions, her dreams into art, her voice into a tool of expression and invocation. For Yoko, New York was another portal, and it was there that Yoko began to formalize her imaginative weaving of the creative spells that would come to make her famous. Yoko was there in the room when artist George Maciunas chose the name Fluxus for a fledgling communal art project, and in fact, her makeshift loft gallery helped inspire and foster the movement. She was already practicing what Fluxus preached, turning life into ritual, art into instruction, imagination into event. Fluxus became an international, interdisciplinary community of artists, composers, designers, and poets who valued process over product and experience over definition, and rejected cold, sterile galleries in favor of events, happenings, and experimentation. Fluxus is famous in the avant-garde world. Artists like the aforementioned John Cage and Namjoon Paik. Until I started researching for this episode, I didn't even know Yoko was a member. It's like the world wanted me to think she didn't exist until John Lennon plucked her from obscurity. Anyway, with Fluxus in the early 1960s, Yoko found a kind of constellation of artists like her. Bent on dissolving the boundaries between art and life, Fluxus was a revolution against the rigidity of art institutions. Its artists sought to strip art of its preciousness and return it to the everyday, to laughter, to breath, to imagination. Yoko's loft in New York became one of the epicenters. She opened her space to concerts, happenings, performances that blurred music, poetry, silence, and chants. Here, John Cage, Lamonte Young, and the Fluxus Circle gathered with Yoko at the center, weaving her delicate webs. Her instruction pieces fit seamlessly into this ethos. Art as event, art as ritual, art as suggestion. Imagine pulling the sky down. Imagine painting with your breath. The invitation was magic. Fluxus celebrated impermanence, and Yoko embraced it with a witch's gaze. Her works asked participants not to consume but transform. Her piece, Apple, was designed to rot. To sit with emptiness and dissatisfaction. To notice beauty in the mundane, pull clouds from the sky. To contribute to and participate in the spell of possibility. In Fluxus, Yoko found her kin, but more than that, she sharpened her own practice of art as invocation, as opening, as a doorway to the unseen. Inspired by the Dada Manifesto by Tristan Tzara, Massiunas wrote a manifesto for Fluxus. The movement's mission, quote, purge the world of bourgeois sickness, intellectual, professional, and commercialized culture. Purge the world of dead art, imitation, artificial art, illusionist art, mathematical art. Purge the world of Europanism. Fluxus would, quote, promote a revolutionary flood and tide in art, promote living art, anti-art, promote non-art reality to be grasped by all peoples, not only critics, dilettantes, and professionals, end quote. None of the other members signed it, though. Maybe a manifesto felt too permanent, too contractual. Anyway, this feels like a good time to just straight up list some of Yoko's major artworks from the 1960s. Just to take this moment and really cast a light on them and consider how many of the concepts are de rigueur in today's art world. What a trailblazer Yoko was. Painting to be Stepped On, 1960. A conceptual piece inviting viewers to walk on the painting. Challenging place and reverence. Bag Piece, 1964. Participants interact from inside a cloth bag. An experiment in identity and ego. Play It by Trust, 1966. An all-white chess set where both sides are white, symbolizing the futility of conflict. Film number 4, Bottoms, 1966. Close-ups of naked walking bums to get to know people from the bottom up. And while much ink has been spilled and many biographies exist, if you really want to get to know the inner workings of Yoko, I suggest picking up Grapefruit, a collection of her instructional pieces in book form, to truly get into her state of mind. She calls them instructions, but the witch in you will recognize them as mini spells of consciousness and perspective, tools to, as Genesis P. Orridge commanded, seize the means of perception. Earth Piece. Listen to the sound of the earth turning. 1963 spring. Tuna Fish Sandwich Piece. Imagine 1,000 suns in the sky at the same time. Let them shine for 1 hour. Let them gradually melt into the sky. Make 1 tuna fish sandwich and eat. 1964 spring. Many of the pieces reflected her inner turmoil. Voice Piece for Piano from 1961 read, Scream. 1. Against the wind. 2. Against the wall. 3. Against the sky. Blood Piece from 1960 read, Use your blood to paint. Keep painting till you faint, A. Keep painting until you die, B. It was Yoko's second husband, Tony Cox, who suggested the Grapefruit book, turning years of instructional art and poetry into a book. But his motives were real world. It's hard to sell art that exists only in the mind, right? And yes, Yoko was married twice before John. And truly, Yoko's 3 marriages almost appear as stages in a lifelong experimental ritual of becoming, each entwined with a phase of her art and exploration. With Toshi Ichiyanagi, the young avant-garde composer, Yoko leaned into the experimental music ferment of post-war New York. Her second marriage to Anthony Cox was a time of films, staged happenings. These were those Fluxus years of opening herself to the world, asking strangers to cut her clothing away in cut piece, daring vulnerability to be the medium of transformation. It's worth noting that cut piece predates Marina Abramovich's admittedly more harrowing version, Rhythm Zero, by 10 years. Then came the third husband, John Lennon. With John, Yoko expanded her magic from galleries to global rituals, bed-ins for peace, performance as protest. 3 marriages, 3 initiations, each a portal, each a spell, and after each, Yoko found herself alone again. She said of the dissolution of her first 2 marriages, quote, "Better to be alone than to feel like I can't breathe," end quote. Through it all, Yoko remained Yoko Ono, in name, in vision, in character. When she lost John, though, it was both. She was alone, and she couldn't breathe. Imagine your spouse, your soulmate, the love of your life is gunned down on the doorstep of your home, right in front of you, close enough for the blood to spatter at your feet. And while the world mourns, stationing themselves outside your window, singing songs that are a constant reminder of what you've lost, you're also receiving death threats. I'm going to finish what Mark David Chapman started. You're next. Just imagine your staff is stealing your secrets and objects from your home, threatening to go public with clandestine recordings of private moments in pursuit of a quick buck. You need constant security details. You're in the depths of grief and your life is in danger. Would you be able to handle it? Or would you change your name or shrink your vision? Yoko didn't. Sure, she grieved. She stayed in bed for a while, but through it all, she remained Yoko Ono. And amid this grief, Yoko decided on a title for a solo album she was working on. It's all right, I see rainbows. If she said it, maybe it would come to be. She fully believed that we can create reality by picturing it, meditating it, and saying it out loud to the universe. She was desperate to change the negative energy around her into positive energy and had to believe it was possible. I mean, she must be able to make her own positive energy because she certainly wasn't getting it from the world at large. John and Yoko were both married when they met and fell in love, so homewrecker was one of the first insults hurled at her by the press and Beatlemaniacs. Already, Yoko had become one of the world's most hated women, and it only got worse from there. John insisted that Yoko be present during recording sessions at Abbey Road where the Beatles tracked their hits. It was all John's idea. He sings about not wanting to be away from her for even a single hour. Nonetheless, once again, everyone blamed Yoko, an intruder, a witch who had put John Lennon under her spell. George Martin, the Beatles' producer, heavily implied that Yoko was psychically sabotaging the Beatles' recording sessions. He said that this other person there was affecting them with their thoughts, even if they weren't spoken, and that these thoughts were impinging on what we were doing, he said. But maybe George Martin wasn't exactly wrong. Yoko was a witch who moved in the medium of the mind. Even if she wasn't doing it on purpose, just the presence of an energy as strong as Yoko's would have upset that delicate balance. But John and Yoko viewed marriage as a ritual that was important to both of them. A ceremony of love and commitment to each other and to a shared vision of creativity infiltrating all things, including activism. Immediately after the wedding, Yoko and John focused their attention outward. In March 1969, the war in Vietnam was raging. In America and England, massive anti-war protests were being held, along with marches. Protesters held sit-ins. Yoko came up with a twist on the sit-in. She and John would stage a bed-in for peace. They knew that their marriage was big news, so they decided to use their honeymoon to protest the war in Vietnam. It was performance art that came directly from Yoko, John said, with the purpose of getting people talking about peace on the front pages of the newspapers. Quote, "For us, it was the only way," Yoko said. "We can't go out in Trafalgar Square because it would create a riot. We can't lead a parade or a march because of all the autograph hunters. We had to find our own way of doing it. And for now, bed-ins seem to be the most logical way. We think the bed-in can be effective." End quote. As a Montrealer myself, I've visited the Queen Elizabeth Hotel where the bed-in took place. The door of room 1742 still bears a plaque in John and Yoko's honor. At the time, they were mocked, naturally, but succeeded in making peace a part of the gossip hunters' conversation. At a press conference, John said, quote, "Yoko and I are quite willing to be the world's clowns, if by doing so, it will do some good." End quote. But being the world's clowns had its drawbacks. As time went on, Yoko pre-assessed everyone who might come into her and John's lives. Nannies, groundkeepers, journalists, even mega mogul David Geffen, with a combination of astrology, tarot, and numerology. If the reading wasn't right, if the timing was off, or the cards predicted a bad outcome, the answer was no. David Sheff, whose book was one of my main resources for this episode, his is the most recent biography of Yoko Ono, and he and Yoko are friends. So the book amounts to a love letter, and honestly, I'm not above criticism, and I don't think Yoko is either, but I think she's had enough for now. Anyway, David Sheff wrote, "Yoko had always been drawn to the occult, and she regularly consulted astrologers, numerologists, tarot readers, palm readers, witches, and other mystics and seers. Her friend, Tadanori Yoku, said that she was always interested in very unscientific things. He said for her it was something really important, something invisible, something incredible. To believe in something that you can't see is a core principle of her art. Yoko believed in magic. Things were meant to be. She read about spirituality, reincarnation, separate realities, and how to use one's psychic powers. She could be alarmed by bad signs and bolstered by good ones. She believed in positive affirmations. When something went well, she said thank you 3 times aloud to the universe." When I asked why she'd consulted the stars and numerology, she said, quote, "Because it's a larger force than us, in a way. And I was dealing with that, not man-made forces," end quote. Also, she relied on those systems as a way to, quote, "free my brain, think about problems from different angles." She meditated and practiced visualizing. She fervently believed that she could create a different reality by visualizing it, imagining it. She believed that the words she used in everything from song titles to conversation would influence the future. She wanted to fill her brain with positive thoughts, not negative ones. She said, "I knew I didn't have the power to stop the dangerous things that the lawyers would try to do. The only power I had was to manage to move the date of the meeting to when the moon was void astrologically, not in line with the earth. If you have a meeting when the moon is void, everything you decide will later be annulled. I said, well, we have to meet on this particular date because it's the only one available to me. And we met, and they decided on a lot of things I couldn't stop, and later the decisions were annulled." While doing business, Yoko consulted her tarot card readers, numerologists, astrologers, and other psychics multiple times a day. Some of those who knew her well claimed she relied blindly on their business advice, while others maintained that she used them to disorient her adversaries. Both were true. She believed, but the advice from tarot and other belief systems also freed her mind from preset patterns and traditional thinking. It prompted her to consider problems from fresh angles. She believed the universe had its own force, and she was an extension of that force. She felt more comfortable making business moves, knowing she was channeling a force bigger than herself. End quote. And she agonized, pulled and torn between justifiable mistrust and a desire to live out her values. And I think we can all relate. Being bogged down by resentment and fear can drastically impact our ability to go out into the world with love and courage. After John's murder, her occult obsessions became desperate. She shuffled a deck of tarot cards constantly. Not so much divination as a nervous habit. Here's David Sheff again. Quote, Yoko's belief in the paranormal made her ripe for exploitation. She had regularly consulted psychics when John was alive, but after the murder, in a continual state of distress, she turned to dozens of people who claimed to be in touch with and connected to larger forces. Her reliance on psychics came from a desperate attempt to find answers about what had happened and protect herself from the very real threats. She paid mediums to hold seances during which she attempted to communicate with John, and she believed some were successful. Her friend Sam bugged a psychic's phone. The psychic whose phone he bugged would talk to Yoko, hang up, and call Yoko's other psychics. They used the information they exchanged to make their readings and advice consistent and therefore more believable. They'd get their stories straight, Sam said. They were disgusting. Sam played Yoko a week's worth of the psychic's calls with her cohorts. Yoko heard the psychics talking after they consulted with her, sharing stories. Sam thought he'd succeeded. I thought it was a job well done. But later he realized she'd continued to consult the psychics behind his back. Everyone close to Yoko witnessed her obsession with tarot cards. Whether she was in her office or in a recording studio or in the kitchen talking with friends in person or on the phone, she constantly shuffled a deck of cards. After John was killed, others asked her, and she asked herself, why had none of the psychics anticipated John's death and protected him? Yoko obsessed over this, concluding, there were premonitions and warnings. One tarot card reader warned Yoko, John sleeps in blood, a vision that chilled her. She followed his and other psychics' advice to protect him. It wasn't enough, Yoko said. The forces against us were too powerful. In 2010, she said, there is within me this feeling of guilt because I couldn't stop it. Sam loathed her obsession with the supernatural and especially her reliance on psychics. I would always tell her, so why don't they play the lottery if they can predict the future? Why do they live in this shitty house? Why don't they have a car? I mean, if they see everything, it's just so pathetic. But I come from a more practical world. He recalled a psychic giving a group reading in Palm Beach. Everybody was always a princess, a queen, a pharaoh in their past life, you know? I never met somebody who was a normal person in a past life. Sam saw some of the psychics manipulating her by issuing scary warnings of the tragedies that would befall Yoko and Sean and insisting that they and only they could prevent the calamities. And though he continually tried to convince her that the psychics were frauds, he also understood why she believed. She was so insecure. She felt so alone that she wanted some help for herself, he said. Yoko was desperate to feel safe. End quote. Yoko was suspicious of everyone, but can you blame her? If Yoko became cold or hard or desperate during that time, it was because multiple tell-all books were being planned by people she had trusted. The whole world felt against her, and the death threats and vitriolic telegrams continued to roll in. The world was chaotic and scary. Her son Sean said, quote, "It had been true on one level when my dad was alive. They were followed by the FBI. Nixon was trying to deport them and their phones were tapped. There were screaming fans and weird people writing them disturbing letters. And then my dad was killed by a fan. And it was even more chaotic and scary." I do think spirituality was something she clung to because it gave her a sense of control and some power during an overwhelming time. It felt like she was dealing with trauma that she couldn't deal with by distracting herself with tarot and psychics. I didn't like seeing her that way. It felt like it came from a part of her that was out of control and overwhelmed. End quote. Man, I think all we witches can relate to this. We have to contend with the possibility that our healing practices, divination, or belief in the otherworldly might amount to escapism. A distraction from chaos we know we have no hope of controlling. We all need a sense of power during hard times, but we definitely can't just hand that power over to anyone or anything that might become like a personal cult. Obsessive, repetitive card pulls or unquestioning obedience to a psychic guru. In the depths of Yoko's grief, though, magic was a coping mechanism that helped her come out on the other side. I can't begrudge anyone that. So if we're to take another lesson from Yoko, let it be this. Cope. Cope however you can. But make sure those coping mechanisms aren't at odds with who you know yourself to be. Keep your coping, but keep your name and keep your vision. Her husband was murdered in 1980, and Yoko Ono has made it through the past 45 years by continuing to follow her visions, keep John's legacy alive, speak out for peace, for women and children and the earth and all creatures. She has spoken at UN conferences and shaken her ass on the stages of gritty rock clubs. Yes, she licensed Instant Karma to Nike for an ad and people were upset. But what we maybe didn't know is that Yoko donated the proceeds, all $800,000, to the United Negro College Fund. And she saw it as another piece of John's legacy, getting his music and message into ears that might not have heard it. In March 1992, Yoko released ONO Box, a box set that included more than 100 songs on 6 CDs. Some called it a vanity project, but it did exactly what she hoped it would. It made people look at her body of work anew. A sticker on the box set asked listeners to smash your preconceptions, which is where we got the title for this episode and what I hope we have done for our thoughts on Yoko herself. Smash our preconceptions. The collection was the musical equivalent of an art retrospective that spanned her career to that point. It showed how much her work had evolved, but also how consistent she'd been in the themes she'd tackled and styles she'd explored. The 6 CDs contained whimsy, light-hearted love songs, and political statements about feminism, sexism, class, violence, and peace. The songs were forceful illustrations of the way Yoko channeled her emotions through her music. Into the 21st century, Yoko continues to weave spells across sound, word, light, and spirit. With Rising, she returned to music beside her son Sean. She seeded the Lennon-Ono Grant for Peace, sending blessings and resources to those who carried the torch of justice. In Reykjavik in 2007, she raised the Imagine Peace Tower, an eternal column of light, a beacon stitched into the earth. With Arising, she invited women to speak out about their lives. She has collaborated with the Flaming Lips, Cat Power, Peaches, Sonic Youth's Thurston Moore and Kim Gordon, and many more. DJs that remixed her work and brought Yoko to the top of the dance charts, sampled by Wu-Tang's RZA. And in a world where kids asked their parents, who's the old guy on stage with Kanye and Rihanna at the Grammys? The old guy being Paul McCartney. Yoko has remained, forever and always, Yoko Ono, creeping her way slowly out from under the Beatles' shadow and into the light of her own legacy. And in time, the chorus will change from Yoko broke up the Beatles to, as one t-shirt maker's creation states, John Lennon broke up Fluxus. Museums and galleries worldwide unfurl her prolific history in exhibitions that treat her art as living ritual. In 2024, she was awarded the Edward McDowell Medal for Lifetime Achievement in the Arts, recognizing her influence over many decades. She was never just Mrs. John Lennon. She has always been Yoko Ono. On her 80th birthday, the Houston Press ran a piece titled, Yoko Ono Turns 80. Still weird as hell. I recently interviewed Jessica Hundley, you'll hear that interview next week, and knowing that Jess once interviewed Yoko herself, I asked her for her thoughts.
I was lucky enough to interview her, and one of the things she said, which I always go back to, and I feel like is so important, especially for younger people, I think, to understand, is I asked her, I said, you were sort of at this moment of revolution and change and, of the 60s moving into a whole new era. And do you think that the world is a better place now or then? And without hesitation, she said, the world is by far a better place now. She said, she said, you have to remember there were so few of us that, yes, our voices were loud. And in retrospect, you think it was this massive movement. She said, there were so few of us. And now she said, now you have housewives in Iowa doing yoga. You have, she's like the expansion of people taking control of their own lives and taking care of themselves through, all these different practices, which were considered obscure or weird, or they're now universal. And we have this tool, the internet, which she uses very, very powerfully and wisely, and art and music to be able to express these ideas. And she was unequivocally, as hard as it is to kind of see, there are more people in the world trying to transform it in a positive way than there were in 1968, So for her, that really, someone that wise who's been here that long to say that is something I always go back to. And I myself, I just turned 55, and I can tell you unequivocally that the world is a better place now than it was when I was a child in the 70s. Is as much as we're bombarded by the chaos and the sadness and the crisis, there's still, people in general are kinder, more accepting, more open, and more loving than they've ever been in the history of human civilization. So I think that's something really important to hold on to when you feel overwhelmed. And, again, bringing it back to yourself, how can you be the kindest, most open, most loving person you can be? From there, everything is possible, right?
I'll link to Jess's full interview with Yoko in the show notes, but in it, Yoko said, quote, "It begins on a very day-to-day level of knowing yourself. Knowing that you are powerful inside. Power is not something we should be afraid of. Power is great. Power is energy. And in terms of energy, the most important energy is human spiritual energy." And when I say spiritual, I feel like I have to be very careful. I don't mean religious. I mean the energy of the mind, the energy that exists within us. If you're able to tap into that energy, then you're part of the network, and really, Your power is absolutely limitless. End quote. Yoko won't be with us forever. While specific details about her condition are not publicly disclosed, it's been widely speculated that Yoko has been living with dementia. She's currently 92 years old and has significantly reduced her public appearances. She has been observed using a wheelchair, and rumors swirl that she now requires round-the-clock care. And as Yoko approaches her reunion with John on the other side, it's even more important to solidify her legacy. Her contributions to the worlds of magic and the avant-garde as a virtuoso in the medium of human imagination cannot be allowed to be outweighed by YouTube comments, misogyny, and obstinate fear of change. In her song Will I, a clock ticks. Then Yoko speaks. She asks, will I miss the skies? Will I miss the clouds? Will I miss the ocean? Will I miss the bay? Will I miss the sunrise? Will I miss the moon? Will I miss the mountains? Will I miss the trees? Will I miss the city lights? Will I miss the snow? Will I miss the laughter? Will I miss the jokes? Will I miss touch? Will I miss love? Will I miss you? Will I? Will I? John Lennon sang, "The goddess really smiled upon our love, dear Yoko." And I truly hope as time passes that future history will center Yoko, that the goddess will smile upon her and all of us witches. Yoko will always be a beacon, inspiring us to make our declarations, to stay true to our ideas and imaginations no matter what the critics say, to conjure better worlds, and make our dreams come true with the singing of tra-la-la-la. Let's take up Yoko's charge. Smash our preconceptions. Stay weird as hell. Give peace a chance. Do magic. Be a witch. Be a bitch. Be the villain in someone's story. Don't care what they say. Your power is absolutely limitless. Imagine 1,000 suns in the sky at the same time. Let them shine for 1 hour. Let them gradually melt into the sky. Make one tuna fish sandwich and eat. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Tra-la-la-la!
You must be a witch.
If you want to support the Missing Witches Project, join the coven, come hang out with us. Or buy our books, New Moon Magic and Missing Witches, and our deck of oracles, the Missing Witches Deck of Oracles. Find everything you need to know at missingwitches.com.